Hi, fourth grade. I'm back with a few more chapters of Gold Rush Girl. I hope you're enjoying it. Post your comments. Let's see. We are up to chapter 8. Father sat Jacob and me down near our berth on the 'tween deck. We were hardly alone. Many passengers were sleeping or sitting about us playing cards, reading or talking. As the ship rolled and pitched, the whale oil lamps that dangled from the ceiling swung like clock bobs, causing shadows to leap about us like agile acrobats. I have learned something of great importance, Father began. As you know, we are approaching San Francisco. I've been talking to some of the men who will be going to the mines. Everybody agrees upon some things. The first thing, the gold will not be found in San Francisco. One must go 80 or more miles along the bay to what are called the diggings. Obviously, I must go there. The second, Tori, it would be unwise for you to go to these diggings with me. The conditions there, I've been reliably informed, are not at all suitable for a girl. I thought I'd easily find us a house there. I have learned such homes do not even exist. Also, people insist that would be a big mistake to leave you, Tori, alone in San Francisco. Therefore, Jacob shall stay with you. While I go reap my share of gold, you two must stay behind in town together. Left behind? Cried Jacob. I too protested. But these men you've talked to have never even been to San Francisco or the mines. How could they know what the conditions are? I assure you, said Father, they know much more than you. And may I remind you, dear Victoria, that you were not invited to come. You chose, he said in a lowered voice, to make your way upon this ship on your own. I trust the same strength of character will guide you in San Francisco. Beyond all else, I feel it's my obligation to gather wealth before your mother comes. She deserves that, and I intend to prove myself to Aunt Lavinia. But I am your father, was his closing argument. You are my daughter. Therefore, you shall do as I say. Dear father, of course, he continued with barely a pause, I'm informed that San Francisco is a fine modern city. Before I go to the mines, I promise you I will find a suitable house and provide sufficient funds so that you may take care of it. I shall hire a servant. I shall enroll Jacob in a good school. Don't forget, I have every expectation that Mother will arrive not long after we get there. You'll need to be there to welcome her. The truth is, her health may require it. The three of you can wait in perfect leisure for me to come back with my fortune. Then we shall have what we once had and more. Father adamantly refused to listen to any objections from Jacob or me. In other words, while he went to gather his gold, Jacob and I must remain in San Francisco alone. How did I feel about this proposal? When I first heard it, I went to the main deck and, with Mother's red shawl around me, stared angrily out at the sea. But the more thought I gave to Father's decision, the more my temper shifted from vexation to consent to delight. Belatedly, I realized I was being given the opportunity to prove how truly independent I was. I would live in total freedom. How could I ask for more? Once I embraced this unexpected independence, I was full of eager expectation. For the first time in my life, I would be, except with Jacob, live alone. As for taking care of my brother, I thought nothing of it. We remained as close as siblings could be. We would have no conflicts. School must take up most of Jacob's time. I assumed we would have a servant to attend to his needs. While that happened, I intended to live free, far freer than in Providence. Let me further confess, I began to think how wonderful our new wealth would be. In other words, I could hardly wait to arrive. We only had to reach San Francisco for my full liberation to take place. We continued to sail up the Mexican coast. As we were informed, for we could not see it, we were drawing ever closer to the city of San Francisco. Alas, the trade winds were such that we had to go far north and west, as if heading for the Sandwich Islands, then tack about as to sail south and east. Just as we reached our long-anticipated goal, it was August of 1849. We had been at sea for 6 months. We were again thwarted. A thick fog obscured the California coast, while our captain insisted we were too close to the narrow entry known as the Golden Gate, which would lead us into San Francisco Bay and the fabled city. That passage was not easily located. The captain likened his task to threading a needle. To proceed without precision, he announced, was extremely dangerous. What's more, the flow of the tide in and out through this Golden Gate was famously fierce. We might, he warned, be wrecked. To be sure, the captain took pains to tell us those within the bay were no doubt just as frustrated about getting out, since the fog was probably just as dense there. It was all wonderfully emotive. Shadowy fog, hidden vistas, possible wreckage, the true exhilaration of travel. All we lacked were pirates. In any case, we were forced to sail back and forth, north and south, for 5 days, trying to avoid, on one side, the rocky coast of the Farallon Islands, while we tried to find, on the other side, the Golden Gate, the way into the great San Francisco Bay and the fabulous fields of gold. As you might expect, after such a lengthy voyage, my anticipation was high. Jacob and I stood, with many other impatient passengers, upon the deck and stared out, hour after hour, day by day, in the wet, swirling, ashen air. I, for one, found the thick fog to be wonderfully haunting. What wonders was it concealing? Ah, the sweet suspense. Yes, it was frustrating. Still, is there not something sublime in frustration when you know that joy will arrive shortly? It's like a coming birthday. You know a present will be given to you, but you can't bring the date forward. There, there, someone would call as the fog lifted momentarily. Brown and green promontories appeared, a log upon the sea, a leafy branch. Then, oh, the sighs of dismay from all, when the next moment everything became lost to the view, and the fog reclaimed the world. At last, however, the haze melted. A lovely, buttery sun revealed itself high in the sky. The sky was blue. Midst enormous excitement and the highest expectations, we sailed through the Golden Gate, and with its jagged and stiff cliffs on either side. Ah, how awe-inspiring. Next, the celebrated San Francisco Bay unfolded before us like a fan of paradise. The inland sea was truly immense, big enough to hold all the navies of the world. Water sparkling as if it was alive. Pods of dolphins cavorted about our bow. Overhead, pelicans barked and seagulls squawked their welcome. We sailed by a high hill and what appeared to be a small, uninhabited, and rather spectral-looking island where there were no dwellings, only countless birds. Then, for the first time, there before me, I beheld the celebrated city of San Francisco. And what I saw stunned me. Okay, and now we're on chapter 9. I'll read chapter 9 too. Providence, Rhode Island, the only city I knew, was a large old metropolis set upon a graceful tree-crested hill with a multitude of fine wood, brick, and stone homes. Dignified office blocks and a busy port with many wharfs were part of its commercial center. By contrast, San Francisco was set amidst steep, scrubby hills, the color of dead straw, with dusty, sandy dunes and little shrubbery. Its former name was Yerba Buena, Spanish for good herb. But those mint-tasty bushes were, for the most part, gone, replaced by stunted shrub and a muddle of low, wretched, lopsided buildings. These pathetic structures came right down to the water, as if they had slid off the hills. I observed but one small wharf, plus a few others being constructed. What a dismal quilt without color vista. Though we approached a landing cove, perhaps a mile wide, our ship was required to anchor many yards from shore because the waters were so shallow. I could see, and worse, smell, the broad flats of obnoxious mud. Even more remarkable, within the cove, as though stuck in the mud, were a great number of ships. They appeared altogether abandoned, a fleet of ghost-like vessels. Before I could make any sense of what I was seeing, our noble captain, after 6 months of sailing, cried out, "Stand clear! Let go the anchor!" What followed was something close to a riot, with almost 200 passengers so long confined in near pandemonium, clamoring to get off. It was as if people believed the first-sized gold nuggets lay upon the beach nearby, and all were determined, nay, desperate, to claim their share. What's more, not only did the passengers rush to disembark, but the entire crew, the captain included, also left. They too, some of their sea chests on their shoulders, were in quest of gold. One hears the expression, rats abandoning a sinking ship. Though we were not sinking and I did not see any rats leaving, we were nonetheless left behind. It seemed that no one wished to have anything more to do with the steadfast Stephanie K. The promised gold upon the land was their only desire. Yet none of the passengers could walk off. They had to be carried ashore by a flotilla of large rowboats called lighters. Multi-oared, these boats rushed to meet us and poked about our hull like so many nursing piglets. Furthermore, the men who rowed these lighters implored our custom and asked, nay, demanded, whether we had goods to sell. Then, to be carried to shore, these same rowers, better to call them thieves, insisted upon payment of $3 or $5. It was but our first experience of the extraordinary cost of living in San Francisco. Though Father managed to disembark, he told Jacob and me to remain on board while he went ashore to find and rent a fine house where we might live. Be patient, he said. I want to make sure we have a graceful home. It did not take long before our ship was mostly emptied of people. No crew, no officers remaining, and almost no passengers. The Stephanie K's sails hung limp, her deck littered with discarded things, from boots to barrels. Jacob and I could have taken possession of the ship and sailed her to China if we had had the skills. Having no such talent, there was little for us to do but stare at this strange place called San Francisco. I was looking at a city, as I would later learn, made of prefabricated wood frame houses with cloth or paper walls, lopsided packing boxes converted into homes, a few brick and adobe houses, plus some flimsy wood houses from China. There were even peculiar iron houses from New York. Proper buildings were rare. There was no elegant squares. Nothing, I observed, of the city appeared attractive. San Francisco seemed to consist mostly of a multitude of sailcloth tents of different colors. Tents! Thousands of tents. I was reminded of a large revival meeting camp. Yet I knew perfectly well that it was the gold the inhabitants were seeking here, not God. Tell the truth, I saw not one church spire. I would learn later that even our ship's chaplain and his wife had set off for the gold mines. No, I observed not a hint of the extraordinary fabled wealth. The worst of Providence seemed vastly more refined than the best of San Francisco. The word style could hardly be used here, surely not by me. The land of glittering gold revealed itself to be mostly rich in rubbish. Let it be admitted when one has been foolish enough to believe a myth, one casts more anger upon the myth than upon the fool himself who believed in it. Are we really going to live here? Jacob asked me, his voice full of disbelief. For once, my natural enthusiasm was dimmed. I could only manage to say, I fear so. It was 6 long hours before Father returned. He came back as he had gone in one of those lighters. During that time, the prospect that lay before us became worse. The empty vessel remained, but the tide had receded, so that the mud flats had become further uncovered. These flats were full of small channels, which looked like wet snakes, and the stink was extreme. Come along, Father called upon us. I have arranged our belongings will be brought later. Jacob shouted down all the excitement. Have you found us a home, Father? I have. Is it bigger than the one we had on Sheldon Street? Shall I have a large bedroom of my own? You shall see, said Father. but I detected something in his voice that gave me unease. What about food? I asked. Of course, he answered. We rowed to shore. The boatman, an old grizzled fellow with long fingers and blue-veined hands and a battered hat on the top of his head, rowed his way through the twisty channels, maneuvering among the lifeless ships I had previously observed. These fully masted ships were huge. They were towering over our heads, passed one upon the other, as I might imagine a desperate naval battle without so much as one cannon to boom. Instead, there was altogether an alarming lack of life. Confused, I stared up at the gigantic vessels, multi-masted fighting ships, merchant ships, schooners, and brigs. There appeared to be hundreds of them, yet all appeared derelict. Why are these ships here? I asked the man who was rowing. Discarded, he said with a shrug. The crew have gone off to the gold fields. They just left the ships? Asked Jacob, eyes wide with wonder. Nobody wants them, said the rower. Help yourself to 'em if you like. He gave a gap-toothed grin and nodded at Jacob. You can be the captain. Sure enough, I observed signs nailed to some of the hulls of a few of the ships that read, for sale, and some said, free. As we wended our way through the forsaken ships, we bumped and banged one against the other, creaking and rattling and groaning. Some of them had begun to become stripped and torn apart. Others lay half sunk. It was as extraordinary as it was grotesque. It was a fleet of ghostly hulks. But if there were any apparitions, they were of a singular sort, for they threw off a strong stench, rather like bad cheese mixed with brackish seawater. Jacob pinched his nose so hard that the tip of his nose went white. I could only think, I want nothing to do with this. Our rower, who must have seen the look of amazement on our faces, grinned and said, Folks are calling these ships Rotten Row. Very interesting. That's the end of the chapter. So there's a bunch of abandoned ships there in an area called Rotten Row. And San Francisco, as you can tell, was not at all settled yet. And people just came and wanted to right away go up to the diggings to look for gold. So, which is what Father's going to do. So now it's going to become quite interesting as Tori and Jacob are going to be left alone in San Francisco during this time of the Wild West. Okay, I hope you liked the story. Post your comments because I like to hear from you. Bye.